Maya Rodriguez stood outside the massive glass doors of the Steinhardt Conservatory, trying to calm her racing heart. The building looked like something out of a movie, all polished marble and towering columns. She glanced down at her outfit one more time. The navy blue dress had cost her $8 at the thrift store on 5th Street. Her white sneakers were clean, at least. She'd scrubbed them the night before until her hands hurt. Through the glass, she could see other people arriving for the auditions. A girl in a long black gown that probably cost more than Maya made in a month stepped out of a sleek car. A boy around 19 or 20 walked past, carrying a leather music folder that looked brand new. Everyone seemed to belong here except her. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her younger brother, Danny. "You got this, sis? Mom would be so proud." She smiled, feeling a lump form in her throat. Their mother had been gone for 5 years now, but Maya still felt her presence in moments like these. She remembered being 7 years old, tapping out melodies on their kitchen table because they couldn't afford a piano. Her mom had smiled and said, "One day, baby, one day you'll play on a real stage." Taking a deep breath, Maya pulled open the heavy door and walked inside. The lobby was enormous. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the floors were so shiny she could see her reflection. Students and their families clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed, important-sounding voices. Maya clutched her worn folder of sheet music closer to her chest. Inside were pieces she'd photocopied at the library, with notes scribbled in the margins from countless hours of practice. She made her way to the registration table, where a woman with perfect makeup and a tight bun sat with a clipboard. "Name?" the woman asked, without looking up. "Maya Rodriguez." The woman's eyes flicked up briefly, taking in Maya's appearance. Something shifted in her expression, just for a second, before the professional mask returned. "ID and confirmation email?" Maya fumbled in her small purse, pulling out her driver's license and her phone with the email pulled up. The woman checked both, made a mark on her clipboard, and handed Maya a number. "You're number 43. Wait in the main hall. They'll call you when it's your turn." "Thank you," Maya said, but the woman was already looking past her to the next person in line. The main hall was even more intimidating than the lobby. Rows of cushioned seats faced a magnificent stage with a grand piano sitting in the center like a throne. Maya had only played on a grand piano twice in her life. Once at her high school, years ago, and once when a music store employee had felt sorry for her and let her try one for 10 minutes before closing time. She found a seat toward the back and sat down, placing her folder on her lap. Around her, other auditioners chatted with their parents or private tutors. She caught fragments of conversations. "My teacher thinks I should open with the Chopin, but I'm stronger on the Beethoven." "Did you hear? The head judge studied under Vladimir Ashkenazy himself." "This is my 3rd audition this month. I'm exhausted." Maya said nothing. She had no one to talk to. Her siblings couldn't take time off school, and she'd come straight from her morning shift at Rosie's Diner, where she'd worked since dropping out of community college. The scholarship she was competing for today was full ride, including a monthly stipend. If she won it, she could finally stop working 60-hour weeks. She could focus on music, really focus, for the first time in her life. 2 seats ahead, a boy who looked about 18 turned to his friend. They both wore expensive-looking suits. Maya couldn't help but overhear them. "Did you see that girl who just walked in?" the first one said. "The one in the cheap dress?" His friend glanced back, not even trying to be subtle. Maya looked down, pretending to study her music. "Yeah. What's she doing here?" "I don't know, man. They're really letting anyone audition now, I guess." They both snickered. Maya felt her face grow hot, but she kept her eyes on her sheet music. The notes blurred slightly as angry tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them away. She hadn't come this far to let people like that get to her. She'd been working toward this moment for years. After her mother died, Maya had become the primary caregiver for Danny, who was now 17, and her sister Lucia, who was 14. Their father had left when Maya was 10. It had just been the four of them, and then suddenly it was three. Maya had found ways to keep music in her life. There was an old upright piano in the basement of their apartment building. The landlord had said she could use it whenever she wanted. So she did. Every morning before her shift at the diner, she'd practice for 2 hours in that cold basement. Every night after work, another 2 hours. On her days off, she'd practice for 6 or 7 hours straight until her fingers ached and her back was stiff. She learned from YouTube videos, from library books, from a retired music teacher named Mrs. Chen, who lived on the 4th floor and gave her free lessons every Sunday afternoon. Mrs. Chen had been the one to encourage her to audition for the conservatory scholarship. "You have something special," Mrs. Chen had told her just last week. "Not just skill, you have heart. That's what makes great musicians." Maya hoped she was right. A door opened at the side of the stage, and 3 people walked out and took seats at a long table. The judges. Maya recognized one of them from the conservatory website, Dr. Catherine Wells, a famous pianist who'd performed all over the world. The other 2 she didn't know, but they looked equally important and intimidating. Dr. Wells picked up a microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Steinhardt Conservatory Annual Scholarship Audition. We'll be calling you by number. Please be ready when your number is called. You'll have up to 15 minutes to perform your prepared pieces." The room fell silent. Everyone sat up a little straighter. "Number 1, Dr. Wells called. A girl in a green dress stood and walked confidently to the stage. Maya watched as she sat at the piano and began to play something by Mozart. It was good, really good. Maya's stomach tightened with nervousness. One by one, the numbers were called. Each performer seemed more talented than the last. By the time they reached number 30, Maya's hands were sweating. She wiped them on her dress, hoping no one noticed. "Number 43. Maya's heart jumped into her throat. That was her. She stood up, legs feeling shaky, and walked down the aisle toward the stage. As she passed the 2 boys who'd made fun of her earlier, she heard one of them whisper, "This should be interesting." She climbed the steps to the stage, the bright lights making her squint for a moment. The grand piano waited for her, black and gleaming. Beyond the lights, she could make out the shapes of people in the audience, all watching, all waiting. Dr. Wells looked at her clipboard. "Name and piece, please." Maya cleared her throat. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Maya Rodriguez. I'll be performing Piano Concerto No. 3 by Rachmaninoff." The silence that followed was heavy. Maya saw Dr. Wells exchange a look with the judge next to her. In the audience, someone actually laughed. Not loud, but loud enough. Dr. Wells set down her pen and looked at Maya with raised eyebrows. The other 2 judges leaned in to whisper to each other. Maya stood there on the stage, feeling like she was under a microscope. The piano waited behind her, and suddenly the 15 feet between her and the bench felt like a mile. "Rachmaninoff's third," Dr. Wells repeated, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "The entire concerto?" "Just the first movement," Maya clarified, though her voice still came out too quiet. She hated how small she sounded. "And the cadenza." The judge on the left, an older man with silver hair and a stern face, leaned toward his microphone. "Young lady, are you aware that piece is considered one of the most technically demanding in the classical repertoire?" Maya nodded. "Yes, sir. I've been preparing it for 8 months." 8 months, he repeated, and Maya couldn't tell if he was impressed or doubtful. Probably doubtful, based on the look he gave Dr. Wells. The third judge, a younger woman with dark hair pulled back in a bun, spoke up. "Do you have a backup piece prepared? Something perhaps more manageable?" The word stung. Maya felt her cheeks burn. She knew what they were really asking. They wanted to know if she had something easier, something that wouldn't waste their time when she inevitably failed at the piece she'd chosen. "No," Maya said, forcing herself to speak louder. "Just this one." Dr. Wells sighed and made a note on her paper. "All right then. Whenever you're ready." Maya turned and walked to the piano. Her legs felt weird, like they weren't quite connected to her body. She could feel every single pair of eyes on her back. Someone in the audience coughed. Another person whispered something she couldn't make out. She sat down on the bench and immediately knew it was too low. At home, in the basement, she'd stacked 2 phone books under her to get the right height. Here there was an adjustment knob, but her hands were shaking so badly she wasn't sure she could turn it. She tried anyway, twisting it until the bench rose a few inches. Better. Maya placed her hands on her lap and stared at the keys. 88 black and white keys, the same as every piano she'd ever played. But this instrument was different. She could tell just by looking at it. The keys were perfect. Not worn or chipped like the ones in her basement. This piano had probably cost more than her family's entire yearly income. She thought about the first time she'd heard Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto. She'd been watching a documentary about classical music on the library computer, trying to learn more about different composers. When the piece came on, she'd actually stopped breathing. The power of it, the emotion, the way the pianist's hands flew across the keys like they were telling a story. She'd watched that segment 7 times in a row. Later, she'd found a recording online and listened to it every single day for a month. She'd studied the sheet music, breaking it down measure by measure. Mrs. Chen had warned her it might be too advanced, but Maya couldn't let it go. Something about that piece spoke to her in a way nothing else did. "We're waiting," Dr. Wells called out, and Maya realized she'd been sitting there for almost a minute, lost in thought. "Sorry," she said, though she wasn't sure if anyone heard her. Behind her, she heard more whispers from the audience. A woman's voice, probably someone's mother, said, "This is painful to watch." Another voice responded, "Should we even stay for this?" Maya's hands tightened into fists on her lap. She wanted to turn around and tell them all to shut up. She wanted to run off the stage and out of the building and never come back. She wanted to be anywhere but here. But then she thought about Danny and Lucia, waiting at home to hear how it went. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who'd spent hours helping her perfect the difficult passages. She thought about her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed and housed, who'd never once complained, who'd always told Maya that dreams were worth fighting for. "You're stronger than you think," her mother used to say. "When people doubt you, prove them wrong." Maya took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She closed her eyes for just a second, letting everything else fade away. The judges, the audience, the whispers, the doubt, all of it disappeared until it was just her and the music. But before she could play the first note, Dr. Wells spoke again. "Ms. Rodriguez, may I ask where you studied?" Maya opened her eyes and turned slightly. "I'm sorry? Where did you train? Which instructor prepared you for this audition?" There was no judgment in Dr. Wells's voice, just curiosity, but Maya felt her stomach drop anyway. This was the question she'd been dreading. "I didn't attend a formal music school," Maya said carefully. "I've been teaching myself mostly, with some help from a retired teacher in my building." The silver-haired judge made a noise that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Self-taught? And you chose Rachmaninoff?" "Yes, sir." Dr. Wells exchanged another look with her fellow judges. Maya saw the younger woman shake her head slightly, like she was already writing Maya off. "That's quite ambitious," Dr. Wells said, and the way she said ambitious made it clear she meant something else. Foolish, maybe. Unrealistic. "I've worked very hard," Maya said, and hated how defensive she sounded. "I'm sure you have." Dr. Wells gestured toward the piano. "Please, continue." Maya turned back to the keys, but now her confidence was crumbling. She could feel it slipping away like sand through her fingers. What was she thinking? These people had trained at the best schools in the world. They'd heard performances by the greatest pianists alive. And here she was, a girl from a cramped apartment who practiced on a piano that was probably older than her mother would have been. Her hands hovered over the keys, but she couldn't make herself press down. What if she messed up? What if she proved them all right? What if everything she'd worked for came crashing down in the next 15 minutes? In the audience, someone's phone buzzed. A girl whispered loudly, "How long is this going to take?" Her friend responded, "Hopefully not long." "I have a dinner reservation at 7. They were laughing at her without even hearing her play. They'd already decided she wasn't good enough. Maybe they were right. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Maybe she should have chosen an easier piece, something she could play perfectly, something that wouldn't give them any reason to mock her. But then Maya remembered something Mrs. Chen had told her during their last lesson, just 3 days ago. They'd been working on the cadenza, the hardest part of the entire piece, and Maya had gotten frustrated and slammed her hands on the keys. "I can't do this," she'd said. "It's too hard. I'm not good enough." Mrs. Chen had looked at her with those wise, patient eyes. "You know what separates good musicians from great ones," she'd asked. "It's not talent. Plenty of people have talent. It's courage. The courage to try something difficult. The courage to risk failure. The courage to be vulnerable in front of others." Maya had wiped her eyes and nodded. "You have that courage," Mrs. Chen had continued. "I've seen it in you from the first day we met. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even yourself." Sitting on that stage now, with dozens of people waiting for her to fail, Maya made a choice. She could play it safe, make excuses, and walk away. Or she could do what she came here to do. She could show them what years of basement practice and borrowed sheet music and sheer determination could create. She placed her fingers on the keys one more time. This time, she didn't hesitate. Maya's fingers rested on the cool keys, and for a brief moment, she caught her reflection in the polished black surface of the piano. She looked tired. The dark circles under her eyes were visible, even in the distorted reflection. Those circles came from waking up at 5 every morning to practice before her 6:30 shift at the diner. From staying up until midnight to help Lucia with her homework after practicing again in the evening. Her hands looked rough, too. Calluses marked her fingertips, but not just from piano playing. There were also the calluses from carrying heavy trays of food, from scrubbing dishes, from all the work she did to keep her family afloat. She wondered if the judges could see that. She wondered if it mattered. Behind her, someone in the audience cleared their throat impatiently. The sound echoed in the hall, and Maya felt her stomach twist. How long had she been sitting here? 30 seconds? A minute? It felt like an hour. She glanced to her right and saw a girl about her age sitting in the front row. The girl wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she sat next to an older woman who had to be her mother. They both wore the same expression, a mixture of boredom and pity. The girl whispered something to her mother, and they both smiled in a way that made Maya's face burn. That smile said everything. It said, "Look at this poor girl who doesn't belong here." It said, "This is going to be embarrassing." It said, "Why is she even trying?" Maya's hands began to shake again. She pressed them harder against the keys, trying to steady them. What was she doing here? These people came from a different world. They'd probably been playing piano since they were 3 years old, with private instructors and expensive instruments and all the time in the world to practice. They didn't have to worry about rent or grocery bills or making sure their younger siblings had clean clothes for school. She thought about the basement where she practiced. It was cold in the winter and hot in the summer. The piano down there was so out of tune that some notes barely worked. The G above middle C stuck sometimes, and she'd learned to hit it harder to make it sound. The bench wobbled, and there was a crack in one of the black keys that had been there since before she moved into the building. But it was hers. In a way, that broken-down piano in that dingy basement was more hers than this beautiful grand piano would ever be. She'd learned every piece she knew on that instrument. She'd cried on those keys when things got hard. She'd smiled and laughed and felt pure joy on those keys when she finally mastered a difficult passage. The doubt started creeping in again, whispering in the back of her mind. "You're not good enough. You don't belong here. They're all right about you." Then, like a light switching on, Maya heard her mother's voice. Not a memory this time, but something deeper, something she felt in her chest. "Baby, you've got music in your soul. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Her mother had said that when Maya was 8 years old, after her third-grade music teacher told her she didn't have the right temperament for classical music, whatever that meant. Her mother had held her while she cried, then wiped her tears and said those words that Maya had carried with her ever since. Maya took one more deep breath. She let it out slowly, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Then she did something she'd learned from Mrs. Chen. She imagined she was back in the basement, alone with the music. No judges, no audience, no one to impress or disappoint. Just her and the piano, and the piece she loved more than any other. Her fingers pressed down on the first notes. The opening of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto starts quietly, almost hesitantly. Just a few simple notes that introduce the melody. Maya played them softly, letting each note ring clear before moving to the next. Her hands were still shaking, but they knew what to do. They'd played these notes thousands of times. The melody began to build. Maya's right hand climbed up the keyboard, while her left hand provided the foundation. The piece was starting to come alive. She could feel it happening, that magical moment when the notes stopped being just notes and became something more. They became a story, a feeling, a piece of her heart, translated into sound. In the audience, the whispering had stopped. Maya didn't notice at first. She was too focused on the music, on making sure her timing was right, that her dynamics were correct. The piece continued to grow, becoming more complex. Her hands moved faster, jumping across the keys with increasing confidence. Dr. Wells, who had been looking down at her scoring sheet with a pen ready to make notes, slowly raised her head. Her expression changed from polite disinterest to something else. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. She glanced at the other two judges, and they were both staring at the stage now, leaning forward slightly in their chairs. The music built to the first crescendo, and Maya let herself get lost in it. Her whole body moved with the rhythm. She'd watched videos of great pianists, and they all did this. They didn't just sit stiffly and move their fingers. They became part of the music, swaying and rocking and letting the emotion flow through them. Some people might have thought it looked silly, a girl in a cheap dress swaying on a piano bench, but Maya didn't care anymore. This was why she played, not for scholarships or recognition or to prove anything to anyone. She played because the music demanded it, because something inside her needed to come out, and this was the only way she knew how. The silver-haired judge set down his pen entirely. He folded his hands on the table and just watched. The stern expression on his face had softened into something Maya couldn't quite read from where she sat. In the front row, the girl in the cream dress had stopped whispering to her mother. Her mouth was slightly open, and she was staring at Maya's hands as they flew across the keyboard. The technical passages that Maya had practiced until her fingers ached were coming out perfectly. Every trill, every run, every jump was exactly where it needed to be. But it wasn't just technical perfection. Maya was putting something into this music that couldn't be taught in any conservatory. She was playing with the desperation of someone who'd fought for every moment at that piano. She was playing with the love of someone who'd discovered music like a person lost in the desert discovers water. She was playing with the passion of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. The piece moved into a quieter section, and Maya's touch became gentler. This was one of her favorite parts, where the melody became almost like a lullaby. She thought about playing this for Danny and Lucia someday, in a real concert hall, with them sitting in the front row instead of at home waiting to hear how it went. Behind her, she heard someone in the audience let out a breath they'd been holding. Another person shifted in their seat, leaning closer. The boy who'd made fun of her earlier sat with his arms crossed, but he wasn't laughing anymore. He was watching with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something he hadn't expected. Dr. Wells picked up her pen again, but instead of making critical notes, she seemed to be writing quickly, almost frantically. The younger female judge had her hand over her mouth, and her eyes looked wet. The music continued to unfold. Maya was approaching the hardest part now, the section where she'd messed up countless times in practice, where she'd had to stop and start over and over until she wanted to scream. Mrs. Chen had told her that this was the part that separated good pianists from great ones, the part where technical skill wasn't enough. You needed something more. Maya's hands moved into position for the difficult passage. Her heart rate picked up, but she didn't let it throw her off. She'd done this 100 times. She could do it now. She had to do it now. The notes came faster, more complex. Her left hand played a complicated rhythm, while her right hand danced up and down the keyboard. She hit every note cleanly, her fingers moving with a speed and precision that shouldn't have been possible for someone self-taught. But Maya had earned this. Every hour in that cold basement, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt she'd pushed through had led to this. The audience was completely silent now. No coughing, no whispers, no rustling of programs or checking of phones. Every single person in that hall was focused on the girl at the piano, watching something they hadn't expected to see. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't cry now. Not yet. She had to finish this. She had to show them, show everyone, what she was capable of, what music could do when it came from a place of pure love and determination. The piece was building toward its climax, and Maya's entire body was engaged now. Her foot worked the pedals, her arms moved with force and grace, and her fingers found every note they needed to find. This was it. This was everything she'd worked for, and she wasn't going to waste it. The cadenza was coming. Maya could feel it approaching like a wave building in the ocean. This was the moment that every pianist both loved and feared. The moment where the orchestra falls silent and the pianist is completely alone, expected to navigate the most difficult passage in the entire piece without any support. Of course, Maya didn't have an orchestra. This was just an audition, but in her mind, she could hear them. She'd listened to recordings so many times that she knew exactly when the imaginary orchestra would fade away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Her fingers were flying now, moving faster than conscious thought. This was muscle memory taking over, the result of thousands of hours of practice. But it was more than that, too. It was instinct. It was feeling. It was every emotion she'd ever bottled up pouring out through her fingertips. The cadenza began, and Maya attacked it with everything she had. The notes came in rapid-fire succession, cascading down the keyboard like a waterfall. Her left hand played deep, thundering chords, while her right hand traced delicate patterns in the higher registers. It was like two different conversations happening at once, arguing and agreeing and dancing around each other. In the basement, this section had taken her 3 months to learn. 3 months of playing it slowly, measure by measure, until her hands understood the patterns. Then slowly speeding it up, making mistakes, starting over, making the same mistakes again, wanting to quit, pushing through, and finally getting it right. Mrs. Chen had cried the first time Maya played the cadenza all the way through without stopping. "I've been teaching for 40 years," she'd said, wiping her eyes, "and I've never seen anyone work as hard as you do." Maya remembered that moment now as her hands moved across the keys. She played for Mrs. Chen. She played for her mother, who would never get to see this. She played for Danny and Lucia, who deserved a better life than the one they had. She played for every person who'd ever doubted her, including herself. The technical demands of the passage were extreme. There was a section where her right hand had to play a series of octaves at high speed, while her left maintained a complex rhythm. Maya had worried about this part for weeks. In practice, she'd fumbled it more times than she'd gotten it right. Her hands were small, and reaching those octaves quickly was a stretch. But right now, in this moment, it worked. Her hands found every note they needed. The octaves rang out clearly, powerfully. She heard someone in the audience gasp, but she couldn't think about that now. She had to stay focused. The hardest part was still coming. Dr. Wells was leaning so far forward in her chair that she looked like she might fall out of it. She'd put down her pen entirely and was gripping the edge of the table with both hands. Next to her, the silver-haired judge had his eyes closed, but he was nodding slightly, following the rhythm of the music. The younger female judge had tears running down her cheeks, though she didn't seem to notice. In the audience, the change was even more dramatic. The boy who'd laughed at Maya earlier sat frozen, his earlier smirk completely gone. The girl in the cream dress looked stunned, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mother had her hand pressed to her chest, and her mouth was moving slightly, like she was praying. Other people were reacting too. An older man in the third row had tears in his eyes. A teenage girl in the back was recording on her phone. Something she probably wasn't supposed to do, but no one was stopping her. A woman who looked like a piano teacher herself was shaking her head slowly. Not in disappointment, but in amazement. Maya didn't see any of this. She was somewhere else entirely now, lost in the music. The passage was reaching its peak, the moment where the pianist has to play a series of chords that span almost the entire keyboard. They had to be played with perfect timing and tremendous force. This was where the piece demanded not just skill, but physical strength. Maya lifted her hands high and brought them down on the keys with all the power she had. The chords rang out like thunder, filling the hall with sound. The piano seemed to shake under her hands. She played the final ascending run of the cadenza, her fingers moving so fast they were almost a blur. And then, suddenly, it was over. The cadenza ended, and the main melody returned. Maya's playing softened again, becoming gentle and almost fragile after the fury of what had just happened. This contrast was what made the piece so powerful, the calm after the storm. She played the final section with her eyes closed, tears now running freely down her face. She couldn't hold them back anymore. All the emotion, all the years of struggle, all the fear and hope and desperate determination came pouring out. The music was saying everything she'd ever wanted to say but never had the words for. The final chords approached. Maya played them with a tenderness that seemed impossible after the technical fireworks of the cadenza. She let each note breathe, giving them space to resonate in the hall. The last chord hung in the air for a long moment, and Maya held down the sustain pedal, letting it fade naturally into silence. When the sound finally died away completely, Maya lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. She sat there, breathing hard, feeling like she'd just run a marathon. Her whole body was shaking now, adrenaline and emotion coursing through her veins. The hall was completely silent. Maya didn't move. She couldn't tell if the silence was good or bad. Maybe they'd all hated it. Maybe she'd made a fool of herself. Maybe the judges were trying to figure out how to politely tell her she'd failed. The silence stretched on. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could probably hear it. Then Dr. Wells stood up. She wasn't just standing. She was on her feet, and her hands were coming together. She was clapping. Actually clapping. Right there in the middle of what was supposed to be a formal audition where judges didn't applaud until all the performers were finished. The silver-haired judge stood up next, joining in the applause. Then the younger female judge. All three judges were standing, clapping, and they weren't just doing it politely. They were clapping like they meant it, like they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. The audience erupted. Everyone was standing now, the whole hall rising to their feet. The applause was deafening, echoing off the walls and ceiling. People weren't just clapping, they were cheering. The woman who'd looked bored earlier was wiping tears from her eyes while she applauded. The boy who'd mocked Maya was standing with his mouth hanging open, clapping mechanically like he was in shock. The girl in the cream dress was clapping too, but she looked angry about it, like she couldn't believe she had to acknowledge what she'd just heard. Her mother, though, was smiling broadly and applauding with enthusiasm. Maya sat at the piano, overwhelmed. She turned slightly to look at the audience, and the sight of all those people standing and clapping for her made fresh tears stream down her face. She stood up on shaky legs and gave a small bow, the way she'd seen concert pianists do in videos. The applause got louder. Dr. Wells was saying something to the other judges. The silver-haired man was nodding vigorously. The younger woman was still crying. Maya walked off the stage on legs that didn't feel quite real. As she descended the steps, several people in the front rows reached out to touch her arm or shoulder, offering congratulations. She heard fragments of praise. Incredible. Amazing. I've never heard anything like that. She made it back to her seat and collapsed into it, her whole body trembling. She couldn't quite process what had just happened. Had she really just done that? Had she really just played Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto in front of all these people and received a standing ovation? The girl sitting next to her, who hadn't spoken to her before, leaned over and whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Maya could only nod, not trusting herself to speak. On stage, Dr. Wells picked up the microphone. Her hand was shaking slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice not quite steady, "we're going to take a brief intermission before continuing with the remaining auditions." She paused, looking directly at Maya. That was something very special." The audience applauded again, and Maya felt like her heart might burst. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and texted Danny. "I think it went okay." 3 dots appeared immediately, then his response. "Okay? Someone just posted a video and it's already going crazy. Maya, you killed it!" Maya stared at her phone in confusion. What video? But before she could ask, people were surrounding her, congratulating her, asking questions. The next few minutes were a blur of handshakes and compliments and people wanting to know her story. Through the crowd, she saw Dr. Wells walking toward her, and Maya's heart jumped into her throat again. This was it. This was where she'd find out if her performance had been enough. Dr. Wells made her way through the small crowd that had gathered around Maya. People stepped aside to let her through, and suddenly Maya was face to face with the woman whose approval she'd been so desperate to earn just 30 minutes ago. "Ms. Rodriguez," Dr. Wells said, and her voice was completely different from before. The skepticism was gone. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Maya's mouth went dry. "Of course." Dr. Wells led her to a quieter corner of the hall, away from the crowd. The other 2 judges followed. The silver-haired man was smiling, actually smiling, and the younger woman still had tears in her eyes. "I need to apologize," Dr. Wells said, and Maya's brain struggled to process those words coming from someone so important. "When you walked onto that stage, I made assumptions about you, about your abilities. That was wrong of me, and I'm sorry." "It's okay," Maya said automatically, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. "No, it's not okay," the silver-haired judge said. His stern expression had softened completely. I'm Victor Petrov. I've been judging piano competitions for 35 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard something that moved me the way your performance just did. Maya felt tears threatening again. Thank you. Where did you say you studied? The younger judge asked. I need to know who taught you to play with that kind of emotion. I didn't really study anywhere, Maya admitted. I practice on an old piano in my apartment building's basement. A neighbor gives me lessons on Sundays. Everything else I learned from videos and library books. The three judges exchanged glances. Victor shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. The technical skill alone would require years of formal training. I've been practicing 4 to 6 hours a day for the past 5 years, Maya said. More on my days off. Dr. Wells reached out and gently took Maya's rough, calloused hands in hers, examining them. These hands have worked hard, she said softly. Not just at the piano. I work at a diner, Maya explained. I have to support my younger brother and sister. The judges were quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Wells looked directly into Maya's eyes. The scholarship you auditioned for today includes full tuition, housing, and a monthly stipend of $1,500. That's meant to cover living expenses so students can focus entirely on their music. Maya's heart was pounding. Yes, I read about that. Ms. Rodriguez, it would be my honor to offer you that scholarship. Dr. Wells smiled, a genuine warm smile. Actually, I'd like to do better than that. I'm going to personally sponsor you for an additional $2,000 per month from my foundation. Someone with your talent and dedication deserves every possible support. Maya couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The numbers weren't making sense in her head. What? You've been accepted to the Steinhardt Conservatory with full funding, Victor said, grinning now. Congratulations. Maya's knees actually buckled, and Dr. Wells steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Are you all right? I can't believe this is real, Maya said, and the tears were flowing freely now. She didn't even try to stop them. This is really happening? It's really happening, the younger judge said, smiling through her own tears. You earned this, Maya. You earned every bit of it. Maya thought about Danny and Lucia at home. She thought about how she could finally tell them things were going to be okay. Better than okay. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who'd believed in her when no one else did. She thought about her mother and wished more than anything that she could be here to see this moment. I don't know what to say, Maya whispered. Say yes, Dr. Wells said gently. Yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. The judges all smiled, and Dr. Wells pulled her into a brief hug. Welcome to Steinhardt, Maya. We're lucky to have you. As they walked back toward the main hall, Victor pulled out his phone and showed Maya something that made her stop in her tracks. You should see this. It was a video on social media. The thumbnail showed her at the piano, and the caption read, Self-taught pianist brings entire audition hall to tears with Rachmaninoff performance. The view count was climbing rapidly as she watched. 12,000 views, 13,000, 15,000. How did this? Maya started. Someone in the audience recorded it, Victor explained. It's been shared thousands of times in the last 20 minutes. Look at the comments. Maya scrolled through them, her hands shaking. I'm literally crying at my desk right now. This is what pure talent looks like. No fancy schools, just raw dedication and love for music. She plays like she's pouring her entire soul into those keys. Anyone know who she is? I need to hear more from her. There were hundreds of comments, maybe thousands, all saying similar things. Maya felt overwhelmed, like she was dreaming and might wake up at any moment back in her tiny apartment. Her phone buzzed with a call from Danny. She answered it immediately. Maya! Danny was shouting, and she could hear Lucia screaming in the background. You're famous. Your video is everywhere. Mrs. Chen came up and showed us. She's crying. We're all crying. What happened? Did you win? Maya laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. I got the scholarship, Danny. Full ride plus a stipend. We're going to be okay. The sound Danny made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Mom would be so proud of you. We're so proud of you. I'll be home in an hour, Maya said. I love you guys. We love you too. Hurry home. Half the building wants to celebrate with you. Over the next few hours, Maya's life changed in ways she couldn't have imagined that morning. The video hit 100,000 views, then 1 million. News outlets started reaching out. A reporter from a major newspaper wanted to interview her. A concert hall in the city offered her a slot to perform next month. But the message that meant the most came from an email she received that evening, after she'd finally made it home and hugged Danny and Lucia until they complained. It was from the director of the city youth orchestra. Dear Maya, we saw your audition video and were deeply moved by your story and your incredible talent. We'd like to offer you a position as a guest performer and mentor for our summer program, where you'd work with young students from underprivileged backgrounds. Many of them face the same challenges you did, and we believe your story could inspire them to pursue their dreams. Please let us know if you're interested. Maya sat on her bed, reading the email over and over. She thought about being 8 years old, being told she didn't have the right temperament for classical music. She thought about every obstacle she'd faced, every person who'd doubted her, every moment she'd wanted to give up. And she thought about all the other kids out there right now, kids with talent and dreams but no resources, no support, no pathway forward. Kids who might give up because they thought success was only for people from wealthy families who could afford the best teachers and schools. She wrote back immediately, accepting the position. 6 months later, Maya stood backstage at Carnegie Hall waiting to go on for her debut performance. The venue had invited her after the video of her audition had reached 10 million views. She was wearing a beautiful blue gown that Dr. Wells had helped her pick out, and her hair was styled professionally for the first time in her life. In the audience sat Danny and Lucia, wearing new clothes and looking proud enough to burst. Next to them was Mrs. Chen, who'd been crying on and off all day. Dr. Wells was there too, along with Victor and dozens of other people who'd supported Maya's journey. But before she went on stage, Maya did something important. She'd started a foundation with some of the money from her scholarship and the donations that had poured in after her story went viral. The foundation provided free piano lessons, instruments, and support for kids who couldn't afford formal music education. She'd named it the They Said She Couldn't Foundation, and in just 6 months they'd helped 73 children start their musical journeys. Every single one of them had a photo of Maya's audition performance taped to their practice space, a reminder that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. The stage manager gave her the signal. It was time. Maya walked out onto the Carnegie Hall stage, and the applause was immediate and thunderous. She sat at the grand piano, placed her hands on the keys, and smiled. This was exactly where she belonged. As she began to play, she thought about that scared girl who'd walked into the conservatory audition 6 months ago. That girl who'd been mocked and doubted and dismissed. That girl had been brave enough to try anyway, to put everything on the line for one chance to prove herself. And she had. Not just to the judges or the audience, or the millions of people who'd watched her video. She'd proved it to herself. The music filled the hall, and Maya poured everything she had into it. Every struggle, every triumph, every tear, and every smile. This was her voice, speaking through the piano, telling her story to anyone who would listen. And thousands of people were listening, not just in the hall but around the world, seeing proof that dreams were worth fighting for, that talent could bloom anywhere, and that sometimes the people everyone doubts turn out to be exactly the ones the world needs to hear from most.